Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Flatirons Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. This show is brought to you by Flatirons Tuning, your source for any aftermarket or OEM Subaru parts. Be sure to check out our store at flatironstuning.com and stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning.
Open.
I'm hitting record now, and you guys probably for the last 10 minutes had all the good stuff.
Yeah. Welcome back to episode 69, 420 of the Getting It podcast. We're out here getting it today.
Yeah.
I don't know. I got nothing else on that. We were just talking. Oh, sorry. I'm totally stealing your intro on this one, and I'm going to keep talking so you can't get it right.
Go for it.
So we were just talking about whether or not wheel-to-wheel experience is good practice for hill climb, specifically the Pikes Peak hill climb, or how else do you have someone show a resume or experience that they're ready to take on the mountain or something like that, right? So I think the points we just made were there's not a whole lot of other options, right? It's I use an example of the Temple Canyon hill climb and as part of the CHCA, usually the first hill climb of the year. The very first corner of the very first hill climb of the year is coming down from, in my car, well over 100 miles an hour down to like a second or third gear corner. And so a lot of folks that come out, and if they're showing up for their first season, that's the first time they may ever experience braking from 120 miles an hour on a variable surface. And so a lot of folks go off on that first corner.
Sure.
To the point, it's like a cliche. We tell people when they come out to the CHCA series, hey, don't go off on the first corner, idiot. Because people do, right? So it's but so for something like Pikes Peak, it's tarmac. It's just so it's slightly more predictable as a surface than gravel or something like that. But right, it's how else do you kind of prove that you have that? It's not really track awareness, but that speed awareness, that seat of your pants feel to be ready for. I mean, that first corner at Pikes Peak is no joke. You come out of the start line and you're gunned out of over that left there, right?
Yeah.
So Ryan, what were you saying about track awareness too? And like, because talking about time attack, right? A lot of folks take some time to come up to speed, and what were you just saying there?
So like time attack has got it's kind of hard to say like time trials experience, even though it's like the most applicable to like the kind of like how it's set up. But time attack or time trials has got kind of a lower barrier of entry than wheel to wheel does. And a lot of people who will go out and time attack, especially when they're starting out, they kind of like build up to that like mental I'm warmed up and ready to go, and then send it on their third or fourth lap. Whereas even like in endurance racing, you have a long race and you can get away with kind of not being like mentally awake right away when you get out there. But as soon as your tires are on the track, you're like out of pit lane. It's an event and it's happening. And so when you look at like the hill climb, I mean, you're basically starting from like a checker flag, and then you just basically send it. And there's no like time there's no time on track to mentally warm yourself up to the fact that, I mean, you're in competition mode. So I could see like versus why they might have that stipulation where we'd like to see people with more wheel-to-wheel experience or hill climb experience than people with just time trials and time attack experience, because I don't know, it's like not everybody goes out. I do, but not everybody does. And how do you convey that when anybody could put that down on their resume, So
yeah, so I mean the
kind of what we're talking about.
Just to clarify for people at home, so the premise is like Pikes Peak, you can't just sign up to race Pikes Peak. You have to apply for the invitation to run. And if you're a rookie, you have to basically present a pretty detailed resume to explain or to try and show the committee why you would be a good driver, why you would be somebody that is going to be able to be like safely get up the mountain or safely as possible.
Worthy to do that, because I mean that is a race you can't have any loose cannons. It's possible you could get a loose cannon out that could survive a 24-hour limits, but if he's driving erratic, if he's pushing too hard, you're either going to break the car, you're going to crash. Time trials, time trials can be the same. If you're a loose cannon out there, I mean, you're going to get a black flag pretty quick. You know, if you're driving too aggressive, I mean, they're going to send you packing. So loose cannons up on the mountain, we've experienced a few of them up there that have not been invited back, you know, whether it been attitude or crashing, you know, where basically they weren't paying attention enough up there. So,
well, and part of that, I'm sure, is from the race's standpoint that, like, the risk involved because of the road and the cliffs and everything like that. Like, there's like a lot of racetracks, modern racetracks have a lot of safety built into the track. Like, there's a lot of runoff, there's a lot of, you know, you have corner workers and all this sort of stuff. This is a mountain road. Like, it is plain and simple a mountain road. Like, they can't take the cliffs away for race day. They can't put a big airbag underneath the cliff if something should happen.
And they're not going to install guardrails.
Right.
No. And the other part of it too is like the weather's variable throughout the whole thing. You know, you might get lucky and have like a fully sunny day, but like even Scott Crouch experienced like nice sunny spot at the beginning, and then like going through some spouts of rain, and then it's back to sunny again. It's just like, I don't know. It's kind of in the scheme of things, it's like you can experience a bunch of different races in that one run, and you can't just be like, okay, cool. Like, so about 10 minutes into it, I'm gonna be ready to go. Like
when Victor ran up. So it was, I think when Victor ran, they told him there was some rain like at Glen Cove or something like that, and so he's going up, and then all of a sudden he hits like insane quarter-sized hail that is just raining down. Like, if you haven't seen his run up Pikes Peak in the hail, it's crazy. It was so loud, and the visibility was so poor. They were trying to red flag him, but he couldn't see any of those flags. And so he just kind of kept the car, and he ended up getting up to the summit. He was the last one that got up to the summit that year. But I mean, it was just like, that was not what he was told when he left. And we've had that where, oh yeah, there's a light rain at Glen Cove, and no, that actually was hail by the time you get there. Yeah, I mean, it's just, you never know what you're going to get, and the weather is such a variable. I mean, visibility is a variable. Like last year when they even shut it down, there was fog. Even when they had moved the finish line below Devils, there was fog, like for the last, I don't know, eighth of a mile, quarter of a mile. Like, having lack of visibility coming up, you know, from Glen Cove to Devils and the W's and all those drop-offs, that's kind of where seeing seems important, I think.
Yeah.
You know? And
another thing too is, I think it's I want to say this too, and this is kind of like from my experience and my own like namesake. Also, getting to the top of the mountain doesn't make you better than anybody else who's doing. Like, I have definitely competed against guys like Sean and Cash and stuff like that who struggle with, you know, flags on track and, you know, other cars around them. I mean, the hill climb is like, it's an awesome thing. It's also a very unique thing. So trying to vet somebody to do time trials is a lot less critical than trying to vet somebody to do the hill climb. But that doesn't mean that somebody who's doing the hill climb is equally prepared or beyond prepared to do like wheel-to-wheel racing, like to hop in a car.
Use me for example. Like, I do okay at hill climbs, but just last weekend we were talking about this at the Lemons race, and you're only losing like a second per lap in traffic, and I'm losing 6 seconds per lap in traffic, right? And so that's a skill that I don't have. You know, I have my specialty, I dabble in other stuff, and your specialty or you know, your bank of knowledge there, bank of skills or something like that, is just that much deeper, especially in that one place there. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit more in a second, but I also wanted to ask first, while we're still like on the like starting cold and having to go immediately to 100% thing, either for you guys that have crewed for Scott Crouch or for your own competitions, you know, obviously not as much Pikes Peak stuff otherwise, like pre-run routines, like what, I mean, especially for, you know, time trial, especially if you have a short run window, right? If you have, you know, a short window to, you know, keep the car cool and get your lap in. If you're out for, you know, an out lap, you know, a heater and an in lap kind of thing, it's almost the same kind of mindset. So, but I'm curious, you know, about Scott Crouch's routines and things he does to get himself in the mindset. I'm curious about your guys's for your events and something like that, because that's something that I do actually practice and have a routine that comes from even before I raced cars, you know, in previous lives and stuff like that to get set. So what do you got? Talk about that. I want to hear from you guys.
Well, Scott Crouch isn't a very talkative person. So, you know, before the race, he doesn't say much. It doesn't seem like he does much. I'm sure there's mental preparation going on, but hey, we're up in 10 minutes, 2 cars ahead of you. And okay, he puts his clothes on and waits in line and he goes.
So, yeah, his background is actually ski racing. He was a ski racer, you know, I assume high school all through college, and I believe a pretty high level. And I think there's a lot of parallels I see to him getting ready to run a Pikes Peak to, like, if you watch people that are doing like giant slalom, where they're just getting into the blocks and getting ready to like push through the blocks and initiate the run. That there's a lot of similarities I feel there, because like, so at Pikes Peak, he doesn't have the arm restraints, and so he has to run with the windows up. And like when you're walking with the car, you can walk up in the line to get to the start line, and it's open in the pits and there's people milling about. And then like that last couple, like basically the next 2 cars to go out, there's one on the start line, and then there's the one behind it that are behind this fence that are separated off. And only a few crew people can go up there. And usually once Scott goes through that fence, he puts up the windows, and like that's where he's getting himself mentally set. And I'm sure that there's a routine, or he's running through the road in his mind, but that's just where he's doing whatever he does mentally to get ready. And that's again where I just think there's a parallel to like a giant slalom person just getting ready to drop down the mountain, except he's going up it, but same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about you, Scott? Do you have one of your own?
I don't. Mostly it's panic of, did I latch my hood? Did I remember to put fuel in? Usually it's just things like that. Like I'll get in and get strapped in, and I'm like, shit, is my hood latched? That's just it. I mean, mostly I just get in and go drive, because to me it's still just having fun. So I mean, I guess that's right before I go out. For a week before whatever event, I am mentally driving whatever track I'm on, or watching videos, or doing whatever it is leading up to that point. But when I get in a car, I just panic to make sure that everything is secured. And then I go.
Are you like a fast out of the gate, or does it take you like a bit on track to kind of get settled in? Because some people, like I noticed some people will do like their fastest lap, especially in time attack or time trials, like on the 10th lap. I'm like, what was going on with this person 9 laps? Like the car had to be faster then, right? You know? So some people, that's part of their process right now, you know?
I mean, I am, I always feel like, you know, that warm-up lap to warm up the tires, warm up the brakes, warm up the brain is sometimes not sufficient for me. I'm always in doubt on that second lap. Are my tires up to temp? Can I push as much as I want? So usually for me, it's, you know, the second hot lap where I feel like I'm on. Unlike Scott, where this last weekend, I mean, he went out on cold tires from Glen Cove to the summit. And when he launched that thing, it was like, tires are warm, everything's just fine, and just went full blast. So yeah, he's just got that mindset. Like, and he was telling me, he's like, when I push into this corner, I know if the tires are warm. Okay. And that's like, you know, like the first hairpin past Glen Cove is this kind of tight second-hand left hand. And he's like, if I push into that, I know how it's going. And then I just go from there. But yeah, so I mean, it is one of those things where like that second or first hot lap, I just feel like, I don't know. Are the tires up to temp? Even when I was running the A7s, which I knew they were up to temp. And as much as, you know, brake stoppies and scrubbing tires and doing everything to bring the tires up to temp, I still have this thing.
Sure.
Well, and I mean, being able to being able to feel that difference is not an easy thing to get to that point. I mean, you have to have a fair amount of, I feel like you have to have a fair amount of time in the car and experience with how the car can change from the beginning to the end of your 20-minute session to really be able to kind of feel what's going on and adapt if need be. And that's, I think that takes a while to learn.
Sure.
And that's one of the challenges of Pikes Peak is you don't have that luxury. And I mean, back to your question, initial question, I would say if I was on that board, that like I would want to see somebody that has a lot of racing experience and a lot of variety. Like I would want to see somebody that's driven on dirt, driven on pavement, driven in endurance race and driven in time attack. Like if you can do all of those things, then you've got enough variety in your experience in the driver's seat and the variety of conditions and stuff that you've done that, you know, whatever these weird variables that you're presented with at Pikes Peak, I would guess you probably have a decent amount of tools at your disposal to handle it. But yeah, that's, I mean, taking a car that is basically stone cold and just like no warm up for the brakes, no warm up for, well, you could put tire warmers on, but minimal warm up for the tires, and you mentally have no chance. Like if your one run goes smoothly and you don't have to turn around and come back and restart, then basically the green flag drops. From that moment, that's your run. Like that's it. There's no lap, there's no practice. You can't take a corner even before it's the run, and that's it. And the time counts. That's hard. That's hard.
Ryan, was it last year or the year before you went out to the Ridge and you set, I think, your fastest lap of the weekend on your very first hot lap? First session, first hot lap. Is that right?
So my
Internet is bad right now.
kind of
Internet's really bad right now.
so the Ridge.
Oh,
Am I getting better now?
a little better.
Okay.
Your face is back on the screen.
So anyway, so when I was out at the Ridge, Jeanette drove on Friday for the open lapping. So that helped like let me get the tires settled in, because that's like a big part of like a time attack weekend, I feel like, is getting the car dialed. And so when I went out on Saturday, which I was only going to drive on Saturday, and went out on Saturday and basically sent it on the first open lap, like on my first session. And that was pretty much my fastest lap of the entire day until like the very end of the day. I was able to get just barely faster in the last session in the hottest part of the day, but like the way I drove on my first group was not the same way that I drove at the end of the day. So I studied, like Carl Tott is a guy who used to be here from Colorado, lives up there, super fast guy in S2000. And I studied that track because I knew it was a lot of blind corners. I knew he had a fast time, and it gave me stuff to like really think about. So I did that for like a solid week, watching his videos. I had a track map. I wrote down notes in each one of those corners and stuff. Basically went out on Saturday with it. Now I did go faster on Sunday, but I wasn't trying to drive on Sunday. So what happened on Sunday, you know, I was ahead of, what's his name? Adam Harding, the owner of Hard Motorsports. And on Sunday, he was able to find a bit more time. And he came up to me, gave me the old pat on the back. He's like, yeah, you did good, man. You know, it was a valiant effort. And so I looked at Jeanette and I said, what's it going to take to get in this car right now? So I went out in the sprinkling rain and was able to put like another second on Adam. But it's that mindset. Like there's so many different things happening. So like, I feel like that's why testing is so important for the hill climb. That's when you're setting and dialing the car in, you know, and then you've got your notes. So that's everything from like the practice you're doing, all the times you've driven it before, the sim, anything that you can have experience. So like me taking those notes from Carl Tott was like giving me like a basis of what to expect on the mountain or on the track. And then I drive it. So you kind of like adapt your driving style and your car and all that stuff. So I was able to do that on Saturday. When it came down to Sunday, like the critical moment was clear your mind, clear your head, get in a car and do it. Just fucking do it. And I did it on, I think it was technically it was my second lap, but it was my first flying lap. And I put that time on them, and I was still going faster the next lap, but the car didn't have it in it. Like it had it in it, but like there's traffic and then the tires and the fuel, like you just run out of resources in that yellow car. And so like from a mental preparation standpoint, yeah, if I go to a new track, I do study the track. But if it's a track I've been to a ton, like High Plains, I don't think about it like that anymore. Or Pueblo or La Junta even. I don't think about the track from each like chunk and then try and put the chunks together. I basically go out there and just with the strategy of what I'm trying to do, and then just go out with a calm mind and do it. And so the yellow cars taught me that you don't get 10 laps to figure it out. Like maybe the car is faster than 10 laps. The world will never know. But
until you put in a bigger fuel cell.
Yeah, that's right. And then you'll just have other problems, I'm sure.
Right.
Like I was getting a 300-degree oil temps at Pueblo, and I was only out there for like 4 laps. So it was without a cooler, it gets hot.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things. Go ahead.
I was going to ask you, so like, let's go back to that scenario on Sunday where you're like, I need to get in the car. I need to try and find some time. Is that like, once you have that couple laps of experience, do you know the corners where you can push, or do you have to or is there a part of the mindset where, I guess, push or take chances? Like, do you feel like you just have to take more of a risk or trust the car, or is it more calculated where, like, all right, I can push in these 3 corners and that should find time?
I think when in a time attack scenario, and I'm not saying this is something you would apply to the hill climb, but in a time attack scenario, you kind of, if you play the safe lap every time and you don't take chances, you're not gonna wow anybody. You're gonna be like, oh, sick, cool, yeah, that's what you did, awesome. But if you're really trying to, like, unless you have just like a ton of power or whatever, or a ton of experience, you got to take chances. And so obviously I launched my bumper out there, and that was a big thing that the internet was sad about. But part of it was there was parts of the course where if you got a good bounce and you got the turn in just perfect, the reward was massive, but there was a risk to it. Not like a risk like at NCM or like the hill climb when you're going to hit a wall, but a risk where you'd go off track and you'd lose your time or whatever. So I feel like when I went out on Sunday, you knew all the spots that you could chance it and send it. And if you going out there, if you think too much about that there's a risk at the end of that reward, you almost just don't do it. You just pedal a little bit, or you lift a little bit, or you brake a little bit sooner and stuff. And you got to get in that moment where if you're trying to do something that really wows somebody, you have to kind of do it where it's scaring you to an extent, like, and you can't think about it to be scared. It has to be, in my opinion, it has to be a reactionary thing, not a preparation thing. Because if you go out there and you're prepared to be scared, then you're going to lift, or then you're going to pedal off, and then it's not going to be the same. And then once you do it, now it's not a big deal. But I think the biggest part of that moment, my proudest part of that moment, was the fact that I didn't drive at all that day. I wasn't planning on driving. I literally suited up, got in the car, strapped in, and just fucking did it. And I think that's a hard thing to do.
Two laps, out lap, hot lap, back in,
done. Yep. And it wasn't just like that was a pretty good lap. That was like a wow lap. That was like a holy shit. Like that was something, and and that's just, I don't know. I mean, if I think too much about it, I won't do it. And so there is kind of like, you have to have the imprint. And so Saturday I was kind of making the imprint, and Sunday it was about the mindset. So you just have to do it and hope that the imprint was good enough that when you're out there doing something that you create a wow moment, not like a cool moment,
Yeah, headspace is huge. Like the psychological game is huge. And it's something that everyone understands it in the context of like physically, like visual target fixation, right? Like you're starting to lose it and you stare at the tire wall, you're going to hit the tire wall, right? The car follows your eyes kind of thing. But the same thing happens mentally too. like the second you think to yourself, oh, I'm going to lose this corner when I feel this feeling, then yeah, sure you are, right? Like it's, but if, I mean, not just visually, physically where you're looking, but mentally, you're always focused on it's going to work and I'm going to do well kind of thing. Like it's I think just as important, right? Like, and I consider myself sort of an emotional driver as well. And it sounds like, you know, from context, whether you consider yourself one or not, you had a moment where like your emotions were in the right place, and that's what really clicked for you. And that is from both this and the downhill bike racing I did before, like that is 90% of, you know, there's a lot of time and practice and skill and bike setup or car setup or whatever, right? But 90% of it is finding that headspace and finding that routine. Or I should say 90% of, you know, performing on race day is finding that routine. Because I don't do the same process like Lemons racing or something like that, because I go out there, you know, purposefully. I mean, this weekend sucked because we had mechanical problems all over the place, but largely it's go out, turn clean laps, make no mistakes, minimize time in the pits kind of thing, right? So it's not, you know, the fixation or the target so much isn't about, hey, go out and nail everything, you know, as much as you can nail it.
Maximum speed,
yeah, right. But it's, I mean, the hill climb thing is absolutely that same way, right? Like it's, you do have to make those mistakes and not even, you consider the consequences ahead of time when you're building the car, right? I'm going to get a good cage, right? I'm going to have up-to-date safety equipment because I might crash, right? But then once it gets past that point and it's time to go do that corner, it's the same thing as, you know, visual target fixation is the mental one too. Like it's, you have to think to yourself, I'm going to push this corner and it's going to work, right? Like it's,
well, and that's where testing comes in, and that's where seat time comes in, because you have to build up kind of your knowledge base of what the car is going to do and what tools you have as a driver to control the car. You know, like when like this is, so one of the reasons we talked about it, why we made sure we put in a limited slip differential in the back of the car, a clutch type diff, is because, you know, Scott's a rally driver and he's got clutch type diffs in the rally car. The rally car slides all the time, and it's set up so that when it slides, you have control of the car with the steering and with the throttle because of the diff setup. And he drives that way a lot, and he has that. When we saw that little step out in the slightly wet conditions, the Pikes Peak car at that time had 2 torque biasing diffs, which means in that slick condition, he's going to lose those tools to a certain extent. And you could see kind of the waggle of the car where he doesn't have the tools that he's used to control the car in that scenario. Putting in a clutch type diff in the back, at least, brings some of those tools back to the game. So you're going to have a lot more control with the throttle with that differential. It also is faster, but it also brings some more similarities to the level of control with the rally car, which slides a lot, in the Pikes Peak car. And part of the rationale there too was, well, if you're a driver and you slide a rally car around all the time and you know what that's like and what it does, if you get in this other car that behaves completely differently like that when it starts to step out and you don't have those tools, that's not going to be as confidence inspiring. And so it would be a big change. And so like that's one of the conversations we had as we're getting the car ready for this year, was that, okay, well, it really makes sense to put this diff in the car because it's going to be more familiar to what he's driving more often than the Pikes Peak car necessarily. And just that familiarity and that knowledge base, that's more confidence inspiring. But that's also what makes the hill climb so unique and so challenging, is you don't have, you know, you can't like do 3 laps up the mountain and then do it for time on race day. It's the one time that all the corners are together. It's your one shot to run it. And that's why I think it takes years to really get to the point where you could really feel comfortable in that scenario, that you have that imprint that you can then work from.
Well, and like Tasso was saying about, you do that prep as you're building the car. You put in the cage, you put in the fire suppression system, you try and take a lot of that variable out of the risk, right? You know that yes, you can wad the car up, but you're still going to get out and walk away and go rebuild it. You know, that Pikes Peak's slightly different in some aspects, just because of sheer 1,000-foot cliffs. But yeah, I mean, you have to take that variable out so that when you get in the car, you're not thinking about the risks, right? You're focusing on line. You're hoping that your car is 100% prepped so that as you're sitting there, none of those other variables matter. It's your headspace and, getting out and well, having fun, but mostly, but then also, trying to focus on how to bring that time down.
And honestly, I mean,
it's fun to go fast.
It's a weird environment.
Right.
Yeah, it is. Pikes Peak, it's a weird environment to actually get behind a wheel and try and drive compared to most anything else. I mean, other hill climbs would be similar, but you have a lot more repetition. So it's
how many runs do you get in a weekend, Tasso?
Hopefully 5 total. So that's 3 practice/qualifying runs, and usually 2 race runs on Sunday, assuming you don't have mechanical issues or weather issues that complicate stuff. So usually, I mean, average is 5. So yeah, it's more than Pikes Peak, and they're shorter courses, they're easier to memorize, and we still get a co-driver. They don't on Pikes Peak. So, but it's I would guess, to your point, well, I guess all of our point at this point, that everyone that has done well at Pikes Peak has either some sort of conscious or subconscious practice or process for dealing with that risk assessment and then push to the side kind of thing, right? Like it's I would guess, whether it's from experience or from a process they picked up in their past or something like that. Everyone has scrub the concerns, focus on winning kind of process that they go through. I know I do from previous sport. So I think it's one of the better things that a lot of mountain bikers come over to cars, right? Or, extreme sports athletes and stuff too. And a lot of it is that, I think, right? Travis Pastrana is obviously an extremely experienced risk assessor. And I think that shows in a lot of his driver. Brandon Semenuk is blowing up the rally world right now and stuff like that. So, amazing. Potentially the best and most stylish freestyle mountain biker of all time. Like, he's getting much more notoriety because cars just have such a bigger thing, but he will forever, his legacy forever will be probably the best freestyle mountain biker of all time. And so, yeah, he has a process for that, right?
And that's where, like, I would imagine, I'm not an extreme guy, but like you build up the experience, the familiarity with whatever you're doing. Yeah, I can't even do it. It's not there. But you've got to be in the mindset, like you're familiar with your bike, you're familiar with your car, you know how it's going to handle, you're going to get a lot of feedback right away, and you're going to know how to process all of that feedback from the car, from the bike, and utilize it in that moment. You've got to be present in the moment and focus on what you're doing as a driver. If you start to let yourself think about the risk and the dangers and all that sort of thing, you've already lost it, because all of a sudden that's going to fill in that focus of being in the moment and of driving and of getting the drive done, the ride done. And then and so it's all like literally just that one shift in focus at the start is what would potentially derail the whole effort.
And that's why a lot of people consider it, therapeutic, right? Is because it forces that presence and stuff like that. And it's, across all sorts of things. Anyone that has experience with getting in the zone, whatever the zone is like for whatever your activity is, knows that feeling and that thing.
Yeah. And a lot of that could come back to skateboarding. I think skateboarding is one of the being in the zone, I think, matters more in skateboarding than I think it does almost anything else out there, as far as when it comes to landing a trick. That trick takes milliseconds. And one of the things in skateboarding that we've always talked about is it hurts less to land the trick than not land the trick.
I would agree with that,
so that being in that headspace, in that zone, like when you flip that trick, whether it's like up a step, up, down 10 stairs, you're flipping that to a rail. When you're in that zone for those milliseconds and everything plays right, you know, it feels amazing, because if you lose it even for a second, then I mean, it hurts.
Well, and to a
It
certain
hurts a lot.
extent, isn't it? I think in driving, this is part of it. It's been a long time, but I think we talked about this, like hitting a fastball, how hitting a fastball, it should actually be impossible, but people do it. But it's like with skateboards and stuff, like things are happening, like millimeter change and stuff so fast, like you cannot consciously process exactly what's happening to correct for it fast enough to actually land the trick. You actually have to kind of let the subconscious take over, because it's processing or doing something faster. And
Well,
that's kind of getting into that zone.
That comes back to that repetition.
Yeah.
I mean, it all comes back to that seat time, you know, and
creating
then,
that imprint.
Exactly. And it's hard to be in the zone when you haven't practiced it.
Right.
Well,
you know,
I'm sure you had people that said this to you skateboarding, because I for sure did with the mountain bike thing too. It's like, oh, you guys are crazy, right? Like, oh, isn't it? Yeah, you adrenaline junkies. What do you love getting hurt or something like that? Blah blah blah. It's like, no, man, I hate getting hurt just as much as anybody else. And I mean, maybe through practice we have slightly better instincts or something, but we weren't necessarily all born with something, right? Like, so it's, but it's building to a thing, right? You don't start out at the point where you can intuitively make minute adjustments in your feet where they contact the board to get it to spin the right direction or something like that, right? You don't intuitively figure out how a bike's going to react to a bump, or how a car is going to react to a bump, or what tires feel like when they start to lose, or whether they're in that like prime slip, you know, angle and stuff like that. So but you work to it, and it's and that's where a lot of people that do these things build those internal processes for dealing with that risk. It's where they build those subconscious processes for processing that information and applying it to things. It's how they find the process for finding the zone, right?
And part of that whole process is learning how to fail. You know, I mean, learning how to fall is, you know, and when it comes to skateboarding, like, I'm sure Ryan is a hell of a lot better at falling now that he got that one wheel than he was when he hopped on my skateboard and he was pushing around the paddock down at Utah and ass over tea kettle. I just see him in my rearview mirror as I'm driving down the paddock. He's trying to keep up with me, right? So, I mean, Ryan, in the last like 2 years, you've had that one wheel. You've learned how to fall. You know, riding a mountain bike, you learn how to fall. You know, and you have to learn how to fail, how to fall over and over and over again. And you utilize that as part of that headspace, but then you have to push it completely out, right? That failing, that falling has to be instinct.
It's got to be reaction, right? Yeah, you're pushing it out, but it's still there in your subconscious. It's just not what you're looking at or you're fixating on, right? Like I've spun many handfuls of whatever times on very narrow roads at pretty high speeds, and fingers crossed so far, I'm gonna knock on the dog's noggin. I haven't gone off the road yet in these spins.
There's that one at wasn't it at Land's End last year where like you spun out and you stopped and you're looking at the cliff and you're like
80 mile an hour spin. Because I was pushing a corner. I knew I had milliseconds that I needed to make up, and I knew this corner is a place like I know I can carry more speed through it. Hit a bump in the corner, it unsettled the car, and I was still fixated on making it. I was like, fuck, it's unsettled. I need to stay matted. I need to be all the way over. And I need to be looking where I want to go. And I'm doing it. I'm like, it's not coming back. Oh, fuck. And so there's a point where I have to then transition to, I know if I stay on this, I'm driving off the cliff at pretty high speed in fourth gear. Or it's time to commit to the spin, let it spin in place, and sacrifice the run. Before I even had committed to the spin and staying on course, I was still trying to save it. I thought to myself, this is a big time wasting slide. I think I maybe already lost this. Unfortunately, everyone else had trouble on their runs too, and it worked out. But that comes from building that slide that I mean, we talk about this in my professional life of having those slides to fall back on when stuff goes weird. So you're not having to figure it out for the first time.
Yeah.
Right. So you have that, so you don't have to figure it out. And that, I mean, that's a process I've developed, is how to fail least failing wise kind of thing.
It's
and
something
the car
like,
wise.
well, you lose that car. You lose that car. If you're going to try and think through how to save it, you're not going to save it. You have to just basically let your body do, let your hands and your feet do what your subconscious or whatever knows it needs to do. That's how you
instinct.
save it.
Oh,
instinct.
This is happening. Instinct. It just does it.
But you have to build that experience up so that you have
spun in rallies, I've spun on track, I've spun in other in much tighter places, but slower places of other hill climb stuff too. And it's a whole thing. And it's, I don't know, keep building on this point. It's a thing I think it's going to sound like kids these days, but it's not kids these days. Bear with me here a little bit.
It's kids these days, but go on.
Kids these days because they're adults, right? There's a bunch of, the 30 to 30 something year old crowd is big into the enduro mountain bike thing. And they're going and they're getting their $8,000 bikes and they're putting their stick tailgate pads on. They're going to these amazing bike parks with amazingly beautiful progression zones where you can do a 1 foot drop and a 2 foot drop and a 3 foot drop and these really friendly, professionally built jumps and stuff like that. And I don't think that they build as much of a both a process for failing, for crashing in this case, right? Or a coping mechanism for it. Because if you spend every step of your progression hurting yourself and crashing and stuff like that, you learn how to crash better, not hurt yourself, mentally deal with it when you're trying to come back from an injury and stuff like that. And so these folks that come up, they get really good. They're hot shit. They've never had a bad injury and stuff like that. They're like, oh yeah, fuck, I shred the park way harder than anybody. Check out the color of my anodized parts and stuff like that, or carbon fiber shit. And it's like, come on, man, like you've never broken anything, have you? Like you've never wondered if you're ever going to think straight again from a concussion. So it happens to them because they don't know how to fall. They take an impact hard on a collarbone or a separated shoulder. Their shoulders sore for 6 to 8 weeks. They're like, fuck mountain bikes. This all sucks. And there's direct parallels to cars, right? I mean, when you're looking at cars come out of the factory with 700-800 horsepower or off-the-shelf Corvettes now running faster than prepped race cars at High Plains and stuff like that. I mean, and Pettiford's a great driver. That's the analogy falls apart in Pettiford here. But just throwing a set of tires on his Z06 that he got or whatever like that, and he's lapping in the 150s, right? Like hauling. And the analogy falls apart because he has these processes, but there's nothing to keep any, choose your favorite occupation for yuppie, and nothing to take that yuppie and put him out there on slicks and do the same thing, and then they're curious, what the hell happened when they hit the wall backwards at 200 miles an hour somehow. That's my rant.
There's a really interesting
kids these days.
It is kids these days. That's Tasso at OTC Racing.
Yep.
Hashtag kids these days.
And I am one of the kids these days. So.
Yeah. But there's a really interesting thing with cars in that I'm going to say it is parallels to what you just said, Tasso, and it has to do with driving instruction and seat time and all that sort of thing. The one oddity with cars is, by and large, we all drive them already. We're already like, I drove a car to work today. I'm going to drive a car home, and tomorrow I'm going to drive a car back to work today. And I've been doing that for a long, long time. And you just get to this feeling like, I know how to drive. I'm a good driver. Like if you've never been in an emergency stop situation, like some kind of weird, like or on track, like there's a whole separate set of skills that you don't have. But like it's this learning to build up these skills that are not natural, that are not things that you do on a day-to-day basis in normal driving, that is kind of this blind spot for people. And there's kind of this expectation, I think, or I should say it's an easy expectation to have that, I've driven in a canyon somewhat quick. I bet you I would be lightning fast on track or
exactly
on a hill
what I was
climb.
just thinking.
And so and then they go out there and then they're slow as dirt, and it's like, and then they either get frustrated or they just don't have the tools to work through that to actually get fast.
Yeah, and I'm guilty of this too. Like I'm absolutely throwing stones from my glass house here. because when I got my car, I would go canyon carve or whatever, and I thought I was hot shit, and I've been driving cars aggressively my whole life, just as a nature of being a punk ass adrenaline junkie. But, and this is what I talked about this before, losing a taste for driving fast on the street, because when I was there, it was everything to me. It was life. It was whatever, that whole mindset, right? Like, I am the hottest shit. Look at how loud my car is when I pull up to the coffee shop, kind of thing. All that kind of thing. I still love loud cars, but like, once you progress past that, what you're talking about, like, you almost lose a taste for. It's a whole different thing, right? It's a whole different level of commitment. It's a whole different zone in your head. I don't know. I'm losing my own point in my head here, but I think you guys know what I'm talking about.
It's once you've achieved that level, it's hard to like even see this other thing that you thought was high level is even being even the same.
Well, and when you're trying to drive fast on any kind of a public road, for one, don't do that. But for two, the risks involved are so much higher than they would seem, and it's one of those things, like, it's intangible until it's there, and oftentimes when you see it, it's too late.
Yep.
Like, I'll use myself as an example. Like, there's a few reasons for this, but like, so we're in Boulder, Colorado. There's this town called Estes Park, which is up in the mountains, and it's like a 45-minute drive from here, and it's pretty high up, and it's tight, windy roads, lots of fun to drive. Years ago,
Highway.
Pikes Peak Highway is another one. Basically, I had a very near miss with a deer years ago. So like, I'm coming down from Estes Park back to Boulder, like driving like quicker maybe than I should have, but not crazy. Come around this blind corner, and all of a sudden there's a deer just in the middle of the road. And it's one of those things, like, the deer was in the headlights, I was in the deer's eyesight, something.
Highlights.
Everything ended up being fine, but it's one of those, like, that really kind of turned me off of doing anything like in the mountains, especially at night, because you literally come across a corner and you just have no idea what you're going to be in for. Every single corner, you have no idea. But I didn't even think of that until it happened, and fortunately everything came out okay. There was no incident at that point, but it was like, yeah, there's a risk here that I had not realized that is just completely uncontrollable. I'd much rather go to a track where everything is cleared off. I can push, and I don't have to worry about deer coming out here or anything like that. I know what the risks involved are, and it's much more fun to push in that environment.
Well, and it goes also, right, you find your ways to assess and then remove your risks from your brain, kind of thing like that. And I can do that for myself, but I don't have a process for it, and I don't want to develop a process for it. I don't want to subconsciously start doing assessing and dealing with risk for other people. Like, that's one of my, I don't want to assume that someone else is okay with the risks that I'm taking, right? Like, if I crash, if there were no other cars on the road and I come around a corner and lose it, and that's just like what I do with the hill climbing, right? Or if there's a deer there, right? There's been deer and bear and stuff on our courses before. Sure. For myself, right, I have a process for assessing that risk, coming to terms with it, and filing it away. But I don't for another driver or for a kid running across the road, which happens all over the place. And people die constantly from this stuff. You don't see or hear a lot of it all the time, because the news has ratios of good to bad news, and there's always plenty of bad news for them to pick from, for what they publish. But I don't. It even comes up with Abby in the car with me. I consistently and constantly almost like check in with her, like, hey, I'm doing this risk assessment for myself. You're good, right? Like, you're comfortable with your safety gear still. You're this. I'm doing everything I can to take care of you, and still, it's always in my mind. It's one of those things I've, debated even moving to a co-driverless class to eliminate that other life that I'm responsible for, kind of thing. And it's the solution I have right now is to have, and she's also in emergency services like me, and so she's very well aware of what accidents do to people and all this kind of stuff, right? We both have similar experiences of picking up the pieces and stuff like that. So I trust that she's educated when she makes a decision for herself, and we have at least in this way, a very open conversation in our relationship about like, this is dangerous, right? Like, you're okay with me putting you, and she trusts my process. She trusts my decision-making ability on the mountain, my instincts and stuff like that. But it was a thing. It's something I struggle with. You know, she's going to start some school soon too, where she may not make a couple races. Do I put another person in that car that I know that I don't trust as much, and I know they can't trust me as much, right? They don't have whatever we are now, 11 years of relationship with me to know what my process is and stuff. Can they truly make that educated? And that's why co-drivers are crazy, and God bless them.
Yep.
Right. But I don't know. But especially like on the street, I don't trust other drivers, and they don't have a reason to trust me, even though they feel like maybe there's some implicit trust between motorists on the road. But that's a big part of that decision process for me is I'm not going to assume that someone else is okay with my risk taking in the situation. Someone else shouldn't be accountable for my mistakes.
So when I started driving at the track, I realized that there was even another level to it, which was, so like Dussex, you said when you did that lap time on a Sunday, like you had to be willing to kind of scare yourself, right?
Yeah. You
had to push beyond what you thought was possible, doable with the car, and you found out that it was possible. And like just in general framework here for this, like the car, like the limiting factor for everybody listening to this except for Lewis Hamilton, he's a big fan. No, he's not. But if he was listening, this doesn't apply to
Louis?
him. Yeah. You're the limiting factor. You're the reason that the car is not going as fast as it possibly could. That's well the case for me. It's the case for everybody else listening to this. And it's because your perception of what the car can do is not what the car can actually do. You have to reset yourself. And so like going faster to a certain extent involves scaring yourself, pushing past what you think is possible. And it's weird to do that. And like skateboarding, mountain biking, like some of these extreme sports, learning and developing and growing your skill level is pushing past these limits of what you think is possible.
Yeah.
And it's
totally.
a weird feeling. It's a weird feeling. It's like, I can only imagine
finding a new comfort zone.
Right.
And like, I know exactly what this car can do. And then you go past there and you're like, well, now I know exactly what this car can do.
Oh, this is what it can do.
Yeah.
And then there's still like 2 levels above that.
Or 10 levels above that.
Right. But like,
I mean, that kind of reminds me of turn 4, right? At High Plains is like,
right.
I'm telling you, it's faster that way, but you can't just go out there and be fast that way. It takes a little bit of time to really get all of it out of it.
Right. And so when I started driving at the track, like driving anywhere on a public road, even slightly quicker, it's like once you realize that there's all these unseen risks that you can't calculate for, it lost all of its appeal because there was I couldn't focus on pushing anywhere, and because it's just like the risks came in. It's kind of back to the beginning point where it's like all of a sudden like knowledge of all these completely uncontrollable risks, it just takes any of the fun out of it because you cannot push to that level once you've had an experience or you're aware of all that. But you go to the track and it's a much more controlled environment and you don't have any of those concerns. And now I can really focus. Now I can really push and I can really try and find where, like, I thought there's no way that the car could take turn 4 at 86 miles an hour, but then it just did. And then, well, now can it do 87, 88? Well, let's go and see and find out. But like, and the awareness that you have to have when you're pushing that hard to do that, to find out if that's possible, or to get to the point where like the car's starting to slide out. Like it's just, it has to me, it has to be in that somewhat controlled environment.
I slid into turn 4 last weekend and it was hectic. I'm a big fan, like a lot of people are, and I know Ryan, even though his call just dropped out here for a second, we talked about this. I'm a big fan of the sacrifice turn 5 for turn 4 speed. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna focus on a couple of these places, right, on High Plains in my stint last weekend. And yeah, that car has amazing brakes, and it just backed in a little bit to turn 4, and I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. But then I was like, oh, okay, cool. No, this corner's great, right? So it worked too. But that's that. Like, I'm sure same thing. Skateboarding, mountain biking, all these things. Like, when you try a thing and it's a little hectic, but it works out, and you're like, oh fuck yeah, this is my new normal. Let's go, dude. Right? Like that's where that stoke. I mean, shit, I just felt it, right? that's where that feeling of stoke comes from, right?
Mhm.
Like it's that's what gets people amped. That's what a lot of people look for in action sports is that feeling of this is sick now, and it's real in a car, it's real on a bike, real on a skateboard, stuff like that. Like it's I'm feeling it. I'm gonna go for a bike ride when we're done here.
Nice.
So.
Yeah, but it's there's so much involved to get to that level, and especially in cars, I think it gets overlooked how much work you really have to put in to get to that point, and that's a large dividing line between who is really going to be fast and who's not.
Man, I hope there's a bunch of people out there right now that just like got stoked off the stoke I just felt. Like, I'm all fired up. I'm sorry. I'm totally off the deep end right
now. No, all good.
Yeah.
Also, so this is as good a time as any. Welcome back to the Flatirons Syndicate Motorsports Podcast.
Yeah. One big
entire
cold
episode
open.
is a cold open. Yeah.
What was it?
Episode 82.
81. 81. As we're
81.
recording it, it might not actually get released as 81. I think I need to stop just saying episode numbers because I'm always wrong. It just like this one, we might record something. We're recording this before Pikes Peak, but where it would go out would be the week right after Pikes Peak. So we might have to record one to talk about Pikes Peak. So then this would actually be episode 82. So sometimes it's me, sometimes it's not me as far as why they're all wrong. But if I don't say what episode it is, that's right.
I mean, if you're going to run this thing, you got to take responsibility for all these things. So it's always you.
Yeah. I know. It's always my fault. That's okay.
Well, that's if you listen to him, sometimes he will like overdub in the beginning. Yeah. Thank you for listening, blah, blah, blah. Yep. We're in episode 81. Enjoy. And then you got Tasso open up with, welcome to the blah, blah, blah. It's episode 69, 420. Yeah. We're going to talk about the stoke and what stokes you.
I refuse to be tamed. I will
welcome.
Not.
Yeah, welcome to the stoke zone.
As a 33-year-old, that's how I'm going to maintain my youth, is always committing to 69 and 420 being hilarious.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yep.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
We plenty of 69s and 420s out there at the Lemons race.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, we're already, 70 minutes in? So let's just go ahead and open up another can of worms. How do you drive fast in traffic?
How do I?
Like on track. Yeah. How are you losing 1 second and I'm losing 6?
I think a big part of this is one of those things that Pettiford talks about with Racecraft and stuff, right? Well, there's all these different ways. High Plains is such a badass track because there's like the fastest line is definitely a unique line, but there's so many fast lines. And so I kind of pay attention to like what some cars do, especially out in your session, where you like have say like that Chevy Malibu that drove pretty much in the middle, or the Malibu or that Maxima that would track out to the left every time. And so I would literally like, as I'm pacing faster cars or cars that are nearly as fast, I would literally set up those rolling roadblocks as blocks, as basically like as blocks to keep my movement going forward. And then the other thing too is like, you watch sometimes like how a driver drives, you get behind the same cars, like even the fast cars over and over again. And you know, like, okay, that tow mater car is going to overbrake for 4, or he's going to overbrake for 1. So like I got stuck behind that tow mater car for like 10 laps. And for those who don't know, this is a Miata with seemingly decent suspension with a 220 horse. Like they admitted to having 220 horsepower.
Yeah.
Who knows how much horsepower it actually has?
They're pulling low 2 teams at High Plains.
Yep. And so in the Lemons car. So it's a K-swapped Miata. And our Miata, the one I was driving, was an Ecotech swap. So it's a 160 horsepower car. And so
I'm in a V8 Miata.
And in the straights, I couldn't keep up with them in the straights, but I would collect them every time in the corners, and I was just basically glued to his bumper. So eventually I just got tired of it. And so he basically drove the same line through 4 and 5 every time. He drove the same line through 1 and 2 every time unless we had traffic. And so basically I said, okay, this is the moment. I gave him a little leash on turn 4, and I basically yeeted it over 4 and just got like, I just surprised the shit out of him in turn 5 and just passed him like on the inside. Mm-hmm. He did no idea it was coming. He just thought I was gone. And like, oh, I finally got away from him. So back to what Tasso was asking, I just know that like when you look at a way that a driver drives and you kind of like memorize how they are and as part of Racecraft, then you know, okay, if I take like a super late apex here, I can drive on the inside. Or if I go on the inside, I can pinch them off and I can get in there quick enough that they don't hit me before they see me. or I know the exhaust is really loud on the right side. So when I get around cars with the exhaust on the right side, it's easier for me to pass on the left because they'll hear me, just like little things like that. And so I do like kind of get picky and choosy with my lines where I'm going to go here, and because I know you're going to go there. So you kind of memorize people's strategies a little bit. And then you see cars coming up like in a turn or two. I know that Malibu is going to be on the inside. So when that orange Crush Miata is going to try and do this, I'm going to do that. I'm going to pin him behind that Maxima, like just stuff like that. Like those guys are even driving defensive, like going into turn 8, which is that hard left-hander. They would basically drive down the middle. Like they would come out of 7 and they'd stay in the middle. And the reason they were doing that was to block anybody coming in on the inside. So even if they didn't need to come out to the right, they would stay in the middle and block the inside. And so I saw them doing that. So when I caught up to them finally, I came out on that high outside on 7 and basically went, and outside, like out inside of them and basically blocked them, like parked them behind another car so they couldn't even get back out, even if they wanted to. And then I out inside of them, if that makes sense.
You took away the apex. Yeah.
Yeah, or took away the advantage, really, because it's not the apex, but it's the passing advantage, So what I'm doing the whole time I'm out there driving is I'm kind of like memorizing in a way people's strategies and trying not to be too memorizable myself. Does that make sense? Like I can drive 3 different ways through most of those corners, and I'm going to use, like, if I know that this car is going to go on the outside and he's going to block my outside, I'm just going to really late apex it and then take them on the inside. And just like, it's not the fastest line, but my car is still faster than their car and they're taking away the ideal line. So I'm going to try and find a way around it. If that makes sense.
Would you say that in part it's that, so you've got enough tools in your Racecraft toolbox to get around the cars quickly versus getting stuck behind them for multiple laps as well?
Yeah, there was a couple times. I did do some respectful stuff. So like if anybody's goes back, they're probably not going to, but they'll watch the video because Max and Susan posted it. But you'll see in the video where I do stay behind like 6 or 8 car trains. And the biggest reason I do that, we weren't going to win. We had a transmission failure the first day that took us out of 2 hours of lapping. And I could see 2 or 3 cars up there was the guy who was in first place or the guy who was in second place. To me, it would have been really shitty to work my way as fast as I can through the cars, only to hurt that guy's attempt and hurt that guy's race. So anybody who watches my laps would be like, "Oh, Ryan, what are you talking about? You had that opportunity to pass those 8 cars." Like, well, if you look 3 or 4 cars in, there's the yellow Miata that ended up winning. I know that too, and I think that's part of the respect for the line. Where for the respect for the race, I should say, where you have to be aware of what's going on too. So yeah, I like passing people. That's part of my strategy. I go out there to have fun and trying to put down badass lap times or whatever. But at the same time too, I try to be aware as well of the other cars that are actually racing, if that makes sense. I was really nice to the yellow Miata and to that 318 Ti because I knew both of those dudes were duking it out for first and second. And I didn't want contact with me to be the reason, that they didn't finish.
Yeah.
Were you on the same lap as them?
No, we were okay. Yeah, we were like 200 laps behind or maybe we were like 150 laps behind the leader by the end of the weekend. But I mean, that's the thing. Like, even though you're on track with them at the same time, it doesn't mean that like we finished like 15th in our class and those dudes finished first in our class. So like, why fuck those guys? But the guys are in 8th. Yeah, I'm gonna dice it and cut up with you guys 100%. But those dudes in first and second are there. I'm not gonna ruin the race,
Knowing that there's such a gap there, it's like there's no reason to potentially impact their race and potentially impact your race by having any kind of contact, any kind of damage, because there's just you're in the same position on the lap, but there's actually nothing to play for there. Right.
So I keep that in mind too. So like if people do watch my driving or watch my lap stuff and stuff, it is a big part of that. Is you'll see I'll come up on trains. And usually if I know that there's just like the Maxima, the Pontiac, the Malibu, this guy in this really weird V8 powered thing who drives like a clown, and a couple other guys in there, then yeah, I'll dice through them and I'll use that Maxima and I'll use that Malibu and all those cars as blockers. But when I see like that there's like the first or second place guy for the overall, I'm really not trying to get in there and dice with them. I'm going to because the traffic will just naturally work its way out. You know, the slow cars are still slow. A good chunk of them actually were trying to be really respectful, which is super cool, but they all did it in different ways. Like some cars just drove in the middle the whole time. Like they were never on the inside or the outside. So that was kind of nice because you could take apexes. You didn't have to steal apexes from them. You didn't have to worry about them, like that yellow thing with that little bird that drops on the back of it. I don't even know what that was, that hatchback.
Yeah,
that dude just drove in.
Our B car was the same way. Some of the drivers were like, look, I'm going to turn a 3-minute lap time, and I know it. That's not why I'm here, right? So they're drive right down the middle. And we actually talked about whether you drive perfect, like just drive the racing line at your pace and let traffic figure you out, or drive the middle. And what, you know, as a less amateur than them, but more than you, the advice that I gave them was, doesn't matter which strategy you choose, just be predictable and be predictable. Like it's
right. Be predictable and be redundant in your predictability.
Yeah. Right. And you could tell when there was driver changes. Like a good example is your guys' white car, because you guys had like 6 people driving that car.
I think like by the end of the weekend, 8 or 10 people drove that car.
Yeah. So you would see sometimes you'd come around like, oh, there's the crossfire, and you're like, I know they're gonna drive right in the middle. I'm gonna fucking fly around them on one. I'm gonna dump that tow mater behind. But then they'd be like, oh yeah, no, I'm driving too. Like, oh fuck, and then the tow mater gets around me. I'm like, God damn it. And it wasn't that I was mad about it, but it is. That's the other thing you had to think about too. And that's the kind of the fun thing about endurance racing versus sprint racing, is that I mean, the variables with drivers are constantly changing too. I mean, the cars have their own capability, but like you said earlier, John, like we're the human factor is the limiting factor for sure. You know,
Well,
I mean, fuck, you guys, you're that V8 Cadillac thing. Granted, you guys kind of like opened it up at the end, but you guys were like a whole second half faster, and that's in like fastest lap time. Like that car had some legs on it for sure.
Car ran second fastest time over the weekend, even though we were like 250 laps down by the end of the weekend. So whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever.
It's,
I mean, that's different directions between us too. It, you know, for the owner of the car is finally the one that put down the 208 or whatever it did.
Yeah.
Because it's his motor and he's okay with pushing 20 psi oil pressure to 6,000 RPMs. So, but not my motor.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't the fastest person on our team either. Jeff Lee, he races WRL and stuff. I think I met him before at NASA, but he ended up turning about, I think he was like 7/10 faster than me on his fastest lap. But not to call him out too much, he got 3 black flags for the weekend and I got none. So like there is kind of like, there is that, all that stuff matters, you know. I mean, you get 3 black flags at 8 minutes per black flag, and that's almost, you know, it's 24 minutes of downtime. So 7/10 of a second isn't really that much faster if that's the other thing. If that's what you have to give up. And in endurance racing, especially with lemons, they were like extra strict this weekend. They were like calling 2-offs, and if they thought there was 2-offs, they're calling aggressive passing. So like a couple times I was like 1 3/4 of a tire off, like just barely hanging on there. A couple times I think I was taking some aggressive passes. Sometimes, you know, like when I was comfortable with the car or really comfortable with that they do, still sometimes they'll surprise you. It was like they were calling black flags in on all that stuff. So I had to try and drive as clean as I could too, as badly as I wanted to be the fastest driver on the team. You got a lot of things that contend with. Traffic is one of them, and really just not getting a black flag. Like black flags hurt big time.
There's so much involved in endurance racing. It's not about going the fastest so much of the time, because there's so many other pieces to that puzzle, like wearing out the tires, wearing out the equipment, using the fuel, like having to come in and do more fuel stops. I mean, taking damage. There's so many pieces to that puzzle.
That's normally our starting strategy for that car, is to run, you know, 9/10 pace. So you're using less fuel, but that 9/10 pace for that car is still at 2:15 lap time, right? So it's still fast, but we can do 75 lap stints at that fuel usage, and that's like 2.5 hour. I don't know exactly what the math is, right? So rough numbers, right? Wow. And then you know, do 4-driver team, that's only 3 stops during the race, and we have our stops down to, you know, really, I mean, in lemons, it's not like NASCAR and shit like that where you can go fast. It's, you know, you have driver out of the car while you fuel, all this kind of fun stuff. But But so much of the strategy for that car is preserve the car, preserve the fuel mileage, no black flags. Like and this is actually, even though I only drove for probably about half the time I normally drive because of our mechanical issues, this is my first like entirely clean Lemons race. It's the mistakes I've had in the past are like, you know, our car previously had mechanical issues, so it's like, hey, whatever, fuck it, guys, go out there and push fast laps, and I spun out in California, and so I got black flag for that, right? So it's fortunately I haven't had flags for like, oh, you really fucked up kind of things. It's been like, hey, come on, guys, take it easy. Like, yeah, you got it. But so that's always the goal, is to stay clean, and it's a fun part. I mean, it's such a change of pace from my normal type of racing that
for sure.
I enjoy it. So
anyways, I like it too. And
like, to the question, how are you losing less time in traffic than I am? It's a lot more looking ahead than I'm doing. So it's a lot more planning ahead, a lot more looking ahead. So I'll work on that. Thank you.
Yeah.
So,
totally.
I think your game with the tow mater car was right about, I didn't even know it was you at the time. I know we talked about this afterwards. I think you ultimately picked me, like, you know, pulled a pick on me to get past me then too. And then I diced with the tow mater car for laps and laps and laps. After that, and my car should have been faster. I was on instructions to stay below 4,500 RPM and below 3/4 throttle and stuff like that. So I had to almost drive it much more like a Miata rather than a V8 Miata, and like hit corners like on the inside hard. And that thing has side pipes, so I play the same game. There's corners I would come into and like give a little brum, you know, on the way into the corner, like, hey, asshole, I'm here, because I'm
right here.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, I got cut off a couple times, and I was really playing. I'm familiar with like the NASA rules on when the corner is yours and stuff like that, but I would rather not go to a post-race inquiry to figure out that I was actually not at fault, right? Like, it's I'd rather just not make the contact. So
that's the other thing too, is like, so I could send you guys pictures, but I don't know. I showed you the picture of like the mirror mark that I put on the Audi. Well, so, you know, NASA, for anybody who doesn't know, and most wheel-to-wheel, once your front bumper breaks the plane of the car that you're overtaking, they have to give you 3/4 of a width of a car. So in Lemons, that means you'd have to pass with 2 tires in the dirt, and they were calling 2 tires. So you had to be careful about playing that game. And also, a lot of the people out there in Lemons don't even really know about passing and being overtaken, or paying attention, or having mirrors that see anything other than their handsome face. So I got, one of the things I noticed from the driving the faster Miata versus the slower Miata last year is that car, the faster Miata, was so much faster out of a corner that the cars that you could normally exactly. You were dive bomb on them a lot more than I was in the yellow Miata. The yellow Miata had the speed, and if you weren't there, they would turn in front of you, you know. But in the purple Miata, you'd come through there and you'd have power, and you would get like right in on them, like, oh shit, like we're both here. Well, with that Audi, they basically turned in on me on 11, and I took the inside, and I was trying not to drop tires off, and they didn't see me. I mean, that purple mirror made a mark on their car about 2/3 the way up their door, and it was their back door. So it was like, I was definitely there, you know, when they turned in on me, and it closed the mirror in. But for both of us, we're like, no! Like, we both way slowed down, and we both got to the top, and I looked at him, and he looked at me, and I gave him like an okay sign, and I just took off because I looked at his car and I didn't see any like real damage. So I was like, obviously we didn't hit. So we just took off. I popped my mirror back out there. But in that moment, it was scary because, like, I don't know, like you were saying, if that was a sprint race or like a NASA race or an SCCA race, you would put 2 tires in on the inside of the curbing, and you would take the corner, and it would be yours, you know. But in Lemon, that much attention. So it's definitely some real surprises sometimes. And that was the close moment, but I had a couple moments like that where I would get in on a car and get on the inside, and they would just turn in, and I don't want to get hit, so I'd have to back way off. Like, I would be on the brakes. And sometimes just even the tires locking up and squealing was enough to get them to pop away from you. You get out there, but it's funny how like these audible things are like really playing in your favor sometimes, and like, hey, I'm right here.
Yeah. You gotta break them out of their routine of what they're doing to realize, oh, there's another car here. Pay attention.
Well, especially if they're
that,
2 hours into a stint and 90-degree heat, and it's day 2, and they've been racing for 2 days now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And they probably stayed up till 2 o'clock in the morning, putting a transmission in and all the other shit like I did.
Yeah.
But, you know, we have some of the other things I was thinking about too, as far as strategy goes, is like that orange Miata was doing things that you probably shouldn't be doing. They were definitely driving it like it was a spec Miata race. But I think they got away with
is too. I think that's where their experience is. So.
Yep. I think they got away with a lot of it because the car was so bright. It was that bright orange. Like people are more likely to see that than like your guys' color is like earth tone rust, I think, of that Miata. You know, it's harder to see a color car like that.
Big.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. There's a lot of like strategy that I never thought about that you could have just even in the color of your car to be making passes. That you know, purple is not as bright as orange or yellow for that matter. So it is definitely interesting.
And it brings in like push to pass, light blinking, and stuff like that is not a bad idea. I had a bunch of cars come out on me on a back straight, right? And we're doing 20 miles an hour faster than cars like at any point on that back straight. And then they're doing their own thing, and then like one guy pops out, and I'm like, gosh, I'm right here. And so I did a lot of driving on the right side of that straight all the way down the straight, or making sure someone knew I was coming before I don't know. So push to pass lights is I've thought about, I don't know.
I think bright gloves would be nice. I wish I had brighter gloves. I wish other people had brighter gloves because people would be like making hand signals. Yeah, so you could see better. It's like, because people do communicate a lot out there with their hands, a lot more than people probably would even expect. People are like, go, and they're sending it, but if you don't see them, you don't know if they're not going to pop out on you. But if they're pointing you by and they got bright yellow gloves, which nobody had, everyone was like in black gloves out there, they're pointing at you and they're like, go, go, go. They're letting you know that they're going to give you the room, and which is nice.
So. I'm a big fan of the caution flag wave off. Like that's one of my, I think that's a really important one because I've been caught by that before. Like you're completely saturated with whatever the maneuver you're making is, and you never had like a close call, but definitely had like a close call on rule breaking, right? Like and that's it's on me, right? Track awareness. There's no excuse for being the person that's not track aware. I take ownership for my move, but I'm a big fan of the yellow flag wave off. So
I have the what was it? I had one pass in particular that I ran right to the flash in yellow, like almost definitely too much. It was that older Prelude that's pretty slow. And and I just had so much speed coming out of the S's that I had him basically passed at the start line, but it was like a flashing yellow on turn 1. So I felt like I had enough time to slow down and stuff, but I definitely took the pass. And that guy came up to me, and it's a guy I know, I just can't remember his name, but the guy came up to me. I was like, dude, what the fuck was that pass under yellow? I'm like, what were you driving? He's like, I was in the Prelude. I was like, oh. He's like, I totally let up to let you pass. Like, I totally let up for the yellow flag. I was like, I think I was passing you. But it was funny is like the perception too. Like you do those Orange Crush guys really ran the flags, and they ran them deep, and they ran as soon as like they would get past the zone and they could see the flag. Like the next station it was green, they were going. So like you were like, I was really having to play that game too to try and keep up with some of those cars because
the whole race to the flag,
which sucked. Like you feel like a dickhead. Yep, exactly.
It's
you kind of feel like a dick
there.
out there. And like when I thought about aggressive passing, it is. I mean, you guys have heard of Tasso's probably heard of it, but like the flag controls in the cars now. Have you heard about that? So they basically have like a champ does it, where they basically have like a flag set up in your car. It's just an LED light. So when it's yellow, it flashes inside the car, and when it goes off, it's green flag racing. And I think that would be so nice because it gets rid of like that whole like, is it yellow at the bunker or is it yellow when I can see it? And can I pretend that I didn't see it till I was at the bunker? But is that like admitting that I'm not looking ahead? Or like now I can see the bunker and I'm past an incident. Can I go? Like I feel like when they have those
High Plains, you can see some of those bunkers for so far. Like so you can, if you see the bunker at the end of the back straight is yellow, and you can see the straight in between 4 and 5. You see that's clear or clearish, right? Or whatever, right? Do you yellow the whole back straight? Do you yellow at the bunker? Do you use your common sense? And it's I mean, I know I'm a big subscriber of common sense. I'm a big subscriber is this isn't a life or death, or shouldn't be a life or death race, so don't make it a life or death race by racing to the flag kind of thing. But I also really like competition, and I really like clear expectations. Which is why I'm a fan of all professional sports or all professional racing programs have a in-car flag notification, or you have a spotter talking to you, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And we try to spot for each other, but it's a lemons race. Like, we're fucking hungover. We're not going to be paying attention 100% of the time. Like, fuck it, it's a lemons race. We're supposed to be there having fun, so we're not going to spot the whole race. Like, oh, it looks like there's a yellow going into turn 4. Like, no, man. Like, those guys are just trying to survive the heat wave. So
the other one was the green flag. Did you hear about any of the green flag drama? So
hey guys,
there
I'm
was
gonna have to dip out. But
okay,
it was good talking.
Love you.
We will see you guys later.
69 cars that basically. But, you had 67, 69 cars taking the green flag. So by the time that the green flag was being flown at the start line, people were calling back to their drivers, it's green flag. And they'd be coming around turn 8 and start passing people, on the out lap. And technically that's legal, but people were getting like really butthurt because they were just like ripping past people. Like, what the fuck was that? And gaining massive positions.
Yeah, especially when we're still in the race, we definitely call out greens to our driver. Because we're going for a win. We're going for overall wins, right? So that makes a difference when this race was won by 2 minutes at the end of, whatever 20 hours of racing or whatever it was. So
I see. So the in-car flagging system is nice. And there are other things too. Is that I see people make the assumption that they're past an incident, even if they don't see the other bunker yet, and they'll send it. And even though you can't see the bunker, and that's not safe either. But I've been able to see the bunker past the incident and just fucking send it as soon as I get past the incident too. And that's really playing those flags. It's interesting because you have to also be predictable to the person that you're passing who's right in front of you.
Right. I had one of those where, like, especially when we're 200 laps down, we're definitely not racing. But I was, in the car feeling it, like in my groove and having fun and stuff like that. I was 100% comfortable. It was what is it? The downhill, not the finish line ones. I forget after 8, it's like 9, 9A, and 10 or something like that. The down one. So like after turn 10 is a little straightaway at the bottom of the hill there. There was a yellow going down the hill. We passed it. I can see the bunker ahead. That's kind of at the end of that straightaway is clear. I can see there's no more incident to pass. All this kind of stuff. But like I started to accelerate and the car was loud right at the incident, like at that point there. And in hindsight, the car was kind of surprised that I came up past him, right? And I was only a car length behind him when I initiated and way more power than them, right? So there was no close call involved, but in hindsight, I was like, I wonder if that's a dick move. Like, and I know, like, by letter of rule, it's not. By vibe, it's racing. There's just, I noticed this too. Like when we were out in Sonoma, they raced way harder. A lot more contact, a lot more racing to the flag, a lot more cars on track. And it makes a difference out there because you're always, you don't have you don't have partial clean laps. You're always in traffic. You're always driving around somebody or being driven around. So the culture out there was like, hell yeah, that's the expectation that the second you're past that incident, you're 100% throttle position, right? So, but less so out here, right?
It's almost like you've got to build up that experience of these races and then kind of feel out what the kind
culture.
of the zeitgeist is for the race, and like, is this what everybody's doing? Okay, well then that's what we need to do. If nobody's doing that, then you probably need to reserve that for only emergencies or something like that, just because it's going to be off-putting because nobody else is doing it.
And
I
the Lemons guys
definitely
talk about it. Every time they come here, they talk about how clean the racing is here and how little incidents they have. So, but go ahead.
Nice.
I definitely took the past the incident, could see the bunker liberties on cars that I knew were harder to get around. Like there's a couple, those Fieros were pretty fast once they were moving and they like hold the line and stuff. So one of them, I like literally like, oh, I could see a boom, and I just really shot past him. I know he probably didn't appreciate it, but like it was better for both of us because then he didn't have to fight me off either. Like I was gonna be faster than him. Like I don't know, it was just like an interesting thing. So the cars that were like hard to get around, I definitely would play it a lot tighter with the flags where like I'm gonna jump on this flag as soon as I can. Or when I could see the orange crush car, like I know those Spec Miata guys, I know what they're doing. Like I'm trying to catch up to Eric and those dudes to try and like say like, hey, look what we can do, you know? But yeah, it's I don't know, man. Lemons is like people undersell lemons as far as a driving experience, and it's really like compared to WRL, where you have to be in a fast car to be fast. Like you don't have to be in a fast car to actually be fast. Lemons, and I think that's what makes it so much fun. Like you're not like at the hairy limits of a really expensive car to try and. I mean, you're getting past the whole time. You're just trying to like not get wrecked, you know.
Right.
And I don't know, it's fun.
It's a good way.
A lot of fun too.
It's a good place to start. And then
I also recommend anybody
WRL,
doing lemons to go into a reliable car. Don't make the mistake in getting into a funny car because those things are always fucking broken. Seems like.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's I'd rather race a car.
Yeah, I mean, if you're willing, WRL is
with,
more fun when you're in like you're in a competitive car that's like mid-pack at least, because you get into WRL and like a low-class car.
That internet's brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dussex, we got to get
Ryan?
you a couple pine
Tasso,
cones to rub
can you hear
together
us?
because Tasso's rock solid today.
Yeah, no big deal.
We have this awkward radio silence.
Yeah.
High
Are you
altitude,
guys
high
waiting on me?
expectations.
Is what it is, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Are you back now?
Yep.
I know. I'm terrible. Terrible.
Well, as we're getting towards the end here and winding down, there's actually I wanted to jump in here, and I guess you guys are gonna let you guys know this as much as anybody else. But as you guys at home are listening,
This whole
Ryan, stop talking.
so anybody listening, especially here at the end, by the time this is up, we are going to have a Patreon for Flatirons Tuning, and we'll go into this more in detail when it actually, like this, we're recording this before, like a couple weeks before this is actually going to be up, but we're going to go into more detail once it comes out, probably put something up on YouTube, going into detail why we made this decision. But, you know, Dussex, Tasso, you guys are basically part of the family anyway, so letting you guys know early here with everybody else that's listening. But the reason is that we've done a lot here. I think we've done a lot of really good things. We've made a lot of progress. I mean, as we're recording this is like 81 podcasts. There's might be up as 82 or something like that, but more than 80 of these things. We're almost to 260 YouTube videos, believe it or not. And we've been doing that for like 6 years. And we've had done a lot of really good things there. We've made a lot of, like, I think we've helped a lot of people out with that. But where we're at now is we really want to kind of take it to the next level. And for those that don't have a clear picture, we're small. You know, the whole shop here is 5 people. We were talking to this shop, I don't know, like a month ago or 2 ago, and they were saying like, man, we're way smaller than you guys. We only have 6 lifts, and we're just doing this, that, and the other. And I'm like, dude, we have 1 lift only. It's basically for the race car and for these projects. That's it. Like that's not what we do. This is just what we do to create content. And beyond that, like most of what you see, unless it's the Pikes Peak car, which is the owner's car, it's kind of the shop car, but it's still the owner's car and it's on a budget. Every other car that you guys have seen us talk about is one of our cars, and it's totally our budget to be able to modify it. And that's why a lot of times there's big gaps in from one video to the next, because it's waiting for us to get the budget together to go to the next step, to put the next piece of content together. So what we want to try and do is to take it to the next level, to speed things up and to do more. And we're going to ask for you guys' help to do that in the form of a Patreon, and we're probably going to get a sponsorship link up on YouTube as well. So as you're hearing this on the podcast, that's basically me letting you know that we're doing that. But so Tasso and Dussex, because you're hearing that for the first time, what are your thoughts about that?
Can you guys hear me?
Well,
yeah.
okay, so Tasso, what's your thought about
that? I mean, I think it would be amazing. There's a bunch of times I have conversations like, oh man, stuff, why aren't you doing this? No anti-lag? What gives, man? Or why don't you do this? This seems like everything I do in all of my Forza games.
Right.
It's like, because it's expensive in real life, right? I have a day job. I work on average of 56 hours a week before overtime, just to try and, make this thing happen. So if we had more resources to kind of push and do some kind of this stuff that people, I mean, I think it's awesome. I would love to learn how to tune anti-lag, and I'd love to share that information. And for example, right? So if it opens up the door for stuff like that, man, I'd be crazy appreciative. Like that's all that. Let's go to the track more, right? Like,
right.
I have people
100%.
like, hey, when's the last time? I would love to go do a track day with you dudes and hang out and get more experience learning how to pass. I'd love to have the conversation about getting better at passing and dealing with traffic with practical experience and practical training as well,
Right.
from NASA sign-off guy and SCCA time trial organizer Ryan Dussex. So
right.
Our expert there. So man, if you're listening out there and like, I'd appreciate it so much. That would be so cool and so awesome.
And we're gonna try and structure it in as best a way to improve everything for everybody at home that watches the videos, listens to the podcast, does is interacting with it as they do. We're gonna try and make that a better experience for you guys at home too. That's where we're kind of ironing out the details for, and that's why it's going to take us a little bit of time to make it live. But the goal is by the time that this podcast is up, that it will be live, or at least you'll be able to find it. So we'll probably maybe even link or just do a quick little podcast to explain it once it's live for people that are just listening to the podcast solely. But it's just, we really enjoy what we're doing here. We really feel like it. The coolest thing is to hear somebody say, hey, I've been listening to you guys' podcast. I love what you're doing, and you guys inspired me to go off and go to the track for the first time, to actually compete with my car for the first time, to do this build that I didn't know anything about until I listened to you guys talk about it, or you guys told me I could do this, or that this was possible. That's super encouraging, and that's why we keep doing this. But it's just like as exciting as it is, it's like, man, we know what we could do more with a little bit of more budget than what we're just able to kind of muster ourselves. And like for you guys, for Tasso, Dussex, hopefully, that will pertain and help you guys do more as well, being part of the Flatirons Tuning team as you are.
I mean, I know there's people that want to know how to get into wheel-to-wheel racing, and if we could do a video series on how to do that,
building a Lemons car, competing in
would
Lemons,
allow stuff like that, right? How do I do this? How do I do that? Hey, let's show you on video, and to have the resources to do that would be amazing.
And I don't have lofty expectations. I mean, I'm not thinking that this is going to be a significant.
Yeah, I do.
Well, I hope you're right.
We're going to get our semi-race hauler soon and our 100,000 square foot, facility.
Well, even if it's just, a little bit more money per month, that they could go towards equipment, helping us get better microphones, more cameras, more GoPros, like getting some software that brings in more options for like recording the podcast or what have you. Like there's so many avenues where if we just had a little bit better resources that we could put towards what we're doing in on this end of things, that it would just it should improve top to bottom what we're able to do from week to week and month to month. So if you're listening at home and you want to see it.
Yeah, and I want to add one thing too.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people probably already aware of this and stuff. But like,
oh boy, Dussex.
Most of us.
Can you get your bike? Can you get the pine cones closer together?
Who come on to like special guests and stuff. We're all donating their time to beef about maybe doing a Patreon. Oh man,
you're good. Keep talking.
Keep going.
Yeah, can you hear me still?
That's better.
So anyway, so what I was saying I think everybody forgets or appreciates that we're doing all this stuff and we're doing it for free and we're having a good time. And I think before I was apprehensive to it because I didn't know if we were really creating that environment that had the information and the knowledge and stuff. But now we're putting it out. We're doing a great time. We're having a fun time. And I think it'd be really sick to get even more support to kind of help keep bolstering what we're doing. I don't think any of us are quitting this anytime soon. So if you guys don't like listening to all the shit that we say, it's probably not going to go away. But it'd be cool to help make it even cooler and even more badass.
To shut up.
You can Patreon us to shut up. That'll be one of the options, maybe.
Heck yeah.
Well, and it's one of those things where it none of this made sense when we started it, and we didn't do it because it made any sense one way or the other. It was because just wanted to do it, and a lot of what the motivation was, two things. One, at the beginning was like we have all these conversations, like when you guys would stop by the shop, you're working on a problem, an issue, whatever, trying to pick out a part, have these detailed conversations, and it's like that's really good information. If we could capture that and make it available, boy, that would sure help the community. Why can't we do that? And now that we've gotten just to the point where we can talk to some of these people that we've talked to, it's so interesting to basically bring other people's experiences. And like, especially like I'm thinking, from guys from Roger Clark, from Sam Pickering, the guys from Australia, Ian, that organized World Time Attack, for crying out loud. Like all these different perspectives from across the globe that are doing what we are doing, what we want to do, what you that is listening wants to do. That's been super, super cool. And to find all these common threads and all these other pieces of really good information that we can capture and we can put out there. And so the hope is that this will let us do what we're doing, but do it better, maybe do a little bit more, do more to try and help get the word out. I mean, that's something that you at home, just share the podcast, like and subscribe and rate the podcast where you're listening to it. But the more that we can do this, I think everybody benefits for it. And I just want to try and take it to the next level. Like, can we really push this and reach more people, reach out to more people to bring them on, get more information on the podcast, just all those sorts of things, and just try and make it an even better listen and a better resource than it even is already.
I was thinking too, we are definitely not too proud to pander. So if you want to pay for our attention, we will absolutely help you figure out
there
your
you go.
shit. So if it's like, hey man, I'll give you $20 if you talk about my shit on your next podcast, yeah, we'll do that shit for sure.
Yeah.
We'll take a bribe, whatever. None of us here are too proud.
That's right.
I mean, I don't know. I'm not for sure. I don't want to speak for you guys, but
I was definitely bribing the shit out of the lemons guys.
Nice.
The lemons judges.
Yeah.
So long and the short of it is just, as you're listening to this, it's an announcement that it's coming, and I'm hopeful that it kind of maybe opens some doors for us, which then will in turn open doors for you guys at home, people that are watching, that are listening. And just see what happens. It's something that we've bandied about here a number of times, and finally we just think we're at that point where we're like, all right, let's give this a shot. Let's see what happens. So yeah, stay tuned for more information. But if you like what we're doing and you can help out in any way, shape, or form, that would be awesome, and we would greatly, greatly appreciate it.
And please talk to us.
Yeah.
Talk to us.
Yeah.
Like, not just to drive up algorithms, but we want to hear from you, right? Like,
leave a comment.
Right?
Give us a call. Shoot us an email.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If there's a topic that we're not covering or something like that, or you want us to get somebody on and you have a connection, or we can just reach out.
If you want to see Ryan without a beard, it's going to take a few you guys or a pretty significant donation, but I'm just going to put that on the table.
That is his brand.
And then we could sell locks of his beard hair on a different website.
Or if you want to see Tasso with a Dussex beard.
I can't. I have a work obligation.
Oh,
I grow a mustache. Hold on, I grow a mustache. I'm allowed to do that. So
Okay.
yeah.
Heck yeah.
And I can't volunteer up a beard because I haven't shaved in like 6 months. This is all you get. It just nothing
Puberty
happens.
though
So
will come soon eventually.
sooner or later.
Lay off
Voice will
those
drop. You get
caffeinated.
hair in funny places.
Get off those caffeinated drinks
Yep.
and all that kind of stuff.
It's the coffee. It's stunting my growth. It's a shame.
That's what it is. So, yeah.
Well, very cool. Well,
Cool.
yeah, we talked about all sorts of stuff. Again, if you're tuning in now, this is the Flatirons Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. If you're not sure how you landed here, that's where we are. But thank you very much. Yes, we got Tasso, 2C Racing, Dussex Motorsports. Scotty was from the shop at some point. But yeah, thanks. That's right. Skate.
Skate hate.
SKHATE.
Skate
hate, yeah.
Skate.
But yeah, until next time, yeah, thank you for all your support, and stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning, and stay tuned for more information of how you can help us do what we do and bring more cool stuff for you.
I don't know. Can I get it on this?
I don't know what you're doing. Claw hand.
Turn it up.
Trying to do a half
Ryan,
part.
I don't know what we're gonna broadcast through the screen, right? But
I don't know what to do with my hands.
On my screen, if you go up to your left shoulder, Ryan.
This one?
Yeah.
And what's messed up is when it records, it actually plays backwards.
Oh no.
Oh man.
Apologies at home for this. I don't know what this is.
There's your cold close.
You know what? If you sign up for the Patreon, we won't do this again.
Or we will.
Or we will.
We'll make a shadow puppet video especially for you.
Oh my gosh.
That's gonna have to be a failure.
Please no. But
we'll call.
Oh,
Ryan?
He's fallen into the matrix again. Oh boy.
Yeah.
All right.
Lost cause. All right.
Bye guys.
See you guys.
Thanks everyone for tuning in to the Flatirons Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. Once again, we'd like to let you know that your support is what makes this show possible. Be sure to check out our online store at flatironstuning.com for any of your aftermarket or OEM Subaru parts needs. And as always, stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning.